Come in, sir.
Good afternoon, Shruti.
Good afternoon, sir.
Welcome.
Good
Sit down,
afternoon,
please.
sir. Good afternoon, sir.
I hope you're comfortable,
Yes, sir.
relaxed.
Yes, sir.
Should we begin
Yes, sir.
the interaction?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. I'm very impressed by your wonderful performance academically,
Thank you,
your
sir.
extracurricular activities, and you're from Bijnor.
Yes, sir.
And of course, Bijnor is a wonderful place.
Yes, sir.
And you did not have your schooling in Bijnor. Your schooling was also in Delhi.
Yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful. So you are avid history scholar. Which part of history fascinates you the most?
So, all aspects, but if I have to name one, ancient history.
That fascinates you the most?
Yes, sir.
And a historian who fascinates you the most?
Historian, so I mean, there are many in terms of actual academic scholars, including the subaltern group of historians, say Raranjit Guha, and newer books by Ramachandra Guha. And in terms of not pure academic historians, I like to read William Dalrymple's books as well.
Very good, very fascinating and very racy. William Dalrymple, the Kohinoor and other, the Last Mughal,
Yes, sir.
Anarchy,
Yes, sir.
very interesting. But I would draw your attention to the fact, have you heard of Sir Jadunath Sarkar?
Yes, sir.
What is your opinion about Sir Jadunath Sarkar, Aurangzeb, Shivaji
Yes, sir.
and others?
Sir Jadunath Sarkar has been a very eminent historian and a very eminent nationalist historian. So, sir, I believe history at any point is written in a certain context. So, certain nationalist historians emerged in a particular time period in response to the British historiography. But I think times have also changed since that time, and newer renditions of history have moved ahead beyond Jadunath Sarkar's idea of nationalist historiography.
But to the extent that we relegate them to posterity, we don't even mention them now. We
So as-
relegate people like Jadunath Sarkar totally into posterity without even mentioning them.
So, as history students, we did go through his work in our graduation, but I do agree that in popular
He is not very contemporary,
conversations,
so to say.
Yes, yes, sir.
There's a quote from Jadunath Sarkar,
Yes, sir.
Aurangzeb. I'll
Yes, sir.
repeat the 3 lines, listen to it very carefully.
Okay, sir.
And tell me about your opinion.
Thank you, sir.
By the very theory of its origin, talking of Aurangzeb and his empire, by the very theory of its origin, the Islamic state is a theocracy wherein the true king is God and the earthly king merely his shadow. And in such a state, to be a non-believer is no better than to compound with treason. Have you understood
Yes, sir.
the beginning of Aurangzeb?
Yes, sir.
So how would you react to the...
Sir, in this quote, he is sort of defining the Muslim theocratic state and the importance of the king in that. And but I believe that in the Mughal Sultanate, in the Mughal empire in India, as well as the Delhi Sultanate, there was a certain independence accorded to the earthly king as well, apart from the theocratic king. And there was a sort of distinction that emerged over time, considering the specific contexts of India. So I do think that while his assessment is correct in a certain way, and the ulema was important in granting legitimacy to the king, but at the same time, there was a certain area of influence where the king could exercise his own wills. For example, diktats of Alauddin Khilji, which necessarily did not draw from what the ulema asked him to do, or Akbar or Shah Jahan later on.
Wonderful. You have a good grasp over the fundamentals of history. I would like to understand from you
Yes.
the imposition of jizya.
Yes, sir.
It was dropped by Akbar,
Yes, sir.
reimposed by Aurangzeb.
Yes, sir.
How would you interpret that if the earthly king had a basic level of leverage
Yes,
that empowered Akbar to drop it, and Aurangzeb had the discretion to reimpose it?
Yes, sir.
Firstly, let me know the merits of imposition and reintroduction of jizya.
So here too there is a wide-ranging debate regarding why the jizya was imposed. Certain historians say that it was purely on religious lines that this was imposed. Others say that, especially with respect to Aurangzeb, it was the state of the empire's coffers at that time and the need for monetary support, which led him to impose the jizya. Another group said that it was to bring into control the Rajput nobility at that time and exercise control over them, who according to them were getting out of hand. So again, there have been a lot of wide-ranging contesting debate, and that is the beauty of history, sir. I think you never get concrete answers at the end.
My last question. There's a parallel with the Marathas who used to impose the Chaut and the Sardeshmukhi.
Yes, sir.
So do you think which was more demanding, jizya or Chaut or Sardeshmukhi?
So that would be very difficult to ascertain in terms of what was more demanding. In
Chaut is 25%. It's
yes, demanding in terms of the numerical
yes,
number.
yes, of the cost. Yes.
Yes, sir. So I'm not aware about the exact.
Never mind. You've given very crisp answers, sir.
I will continue with the history.
Okay.
I was slightly intrigued. You said you have a particular interest in ancient Indian history,
Yes, sir.
that segment.
Yes.
But when you were asked to specify historians, they came to the people including Ram Guha, who are contemporary period, including William Dalrymple, which is popular history of the modern variety, modern India,
Yes.
last Mughals, which were basically whites and so on. So that I found a little odd. Were you deliberately, if I may put a provocative question, trying to avoid mentioning major names in ancient Indian historiography, which unfortunately in the present context are pariahs? Robila Thapar, R.S. Sharma, D.N. Jha, talking of beef, talking of feudalism, or even Upinder Singh talking of violence and political violence in ancient India. And Robila Thapar revisiting the Mauryas, so the policy of Dhamma and peace and Buddhism is there. Let's forget that. There is one historian which fascinates me from my student days in ancient Indian history, D.D. Kosambi. Now, he was a Marxist,
Yes, sir.
but he had a command of Sanskrit language far beyond what Romila Thapar 6 months, pardon my saying so, diploma course in London school qualifies for. The gentleman had a multidisciplinary approach of numismatics, epigraphy, Sanskrit, and his father was the senior professor Dharam Kosambi, who was editor with Engels of the Sacred Books of the East series. So I would say that wouldn't somebody like D.D. Kosambi come to your mind? And would you not like to think of a younger person who's doing popular history of ancient India? If I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, I was fascinated by the book. Kanai Sethi's latest book, which has come out from I think Juggernaut, which is called Lords of Deccan, which goes into the rise of the Cholas, the Pallavas, the later Cholas, the Chalukyas, the Rashtrakutas, the Pratihars, and the Parmars. It starts with circa 4th century Common Era, comes almost to 11th century Common Era, has the Cholas. Fascinating popular history. And both Ram and Dalrymple have given very strong glowing encomiums to the book. So wouldn't you sort of think in terms that people are writing fascinatingly about ancient Indian history, even in popular history terms, and you sort of
Yes, sir.
came
Sir,
back
I haven't gone through the book, but I have read Romila Thapar's. I didn't mention specific books because Upinder Singh I've read during my college days.
She was
as a
teaching in the
textbook.
college, I think.
Yeah, not at my time, but her textbook was the main book that I read for ancient India. For Romila Thapar, I've read only 2 books: The Past Before Us and Early India. So I didn't want to mention names. D.D. Kosambi, again, I've gone through my syllabus.
Why did you not want to mention names? You know, I have a running battle with Romila Thapar since my student days.
Yes, sir.
I think a person who has no first-hand knowledge of the sources should not pontificate on the word, what Mlicha means, what Berber means, what the tradition was. She is outside the tradition. She did a BA from Punjab University, did a direct PhD from London with Bachelor, came back to India, was appointed, not even appointed as a reader here, went to Kurukshetra, came back with her BBC 4th channel program, Channel 4 programs and Penguin book, and suddenly got a readership in Delhi University. I was teaching ancient Indian history at that stage in Delhi University in Ramjas College. I was not impressed. But then came JNU and then came the Marxist takeover of the Indian historiography. I have no problems with the ideological part. I have problems with not being a person familiar with the sources and trying to, based on translations, give interpretations on various things. Now, the 2 books by Romila Thapar you mentioned are not the kind of historical research in ancient India. They are political interventions in the public discourse and making comments. Past, prejudice, lineage and so on. So my question was not about the relative merits of Romila Thapar. Your reluctance to name her. You could have named a historian in an area which interests you and have an agreement or disagreement with her.
Yes, sir, yes.
There would be, there are interesting issues of ancient Indian history which is going to haunt us in present day India, and especially as a civil servant. Beef eating, tolerance, political violence, and I'm not talking of Hindu-Muslim violence. You could go over even to the days of, let's take a Hindu revivalist novelist, if one might put it, labels, Kanhaiyalal Maniklal Munshi and Patanni Prabhuta, where the basic sectarian conflict is between the Jains and the Hindus, Siddharaj and the Solanki king. So the problem is that you would have a problem if you avoided
Sir, I didn't think of it that way. They were the first names that came to my mind, but I
and the
would
first
think
thing
about
that
it.
came to my mind is that this young lady is being too clever by half, avoiding controversial writers on ancient Indian history.
Rightly so, sir.
So that's one part which I thought, you should not appear to be doing this.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
That's one. There have been, even Upendra Singh is very, very good, So you don't have, world doesn't start or stop with Romila Thapar. She's a 94-year-old lady. And both of them have won the same Krug Prize, Upendra and Romila Thapar.
Yes, sir.
But the kind of, ancient Indian history is fascinating. All right, but let's get to, have you ever heard of Theri Gatha?
Yes, sir.
What is Theri Gatha?
Therigatha are a collection of hymns. It's a Buddhist text
Is it a Buddhist text?
written by Buddhist nuns. So I think it's basically oral. This thing which was written down later. If I can recollect correctly.
They are poems written by Buddhist nuns,
Yes,
but
sir.
not really Buddhist texts.
Okay, sir.
Because they talk of a dilemma of aging, death, remorse
Yes, sir.
by a nun who has renounced the world at one time and has.
Yes, so they're one of the few texts which give us a female sort of viewpoint into the Buddhist tradition as well.
My problem is that do they give you an insight into the Buddhist tradition, or do they talk of an existential dilemma of a woman?
In terms of how they interpreted, how women interpreted it
There
at
is a
that point.
small lyric which says, नदी किनारे धुआं उठे मैं जानू कुछ होए जिस खातिर में जोगिन हुई वही न जलता होए. Now that's the kind of thing which Theri Gatha and Shil Bhattarika state. I mean, it is say, oh, don't look at the older nun tells a younger nun, don't worry too much, don't be proud of your looks. धन जौवन का गर्व न कीजिए, ना कुरु धन जौवन गर्वम. Shankaracharya Bhaj Govindam Mudmate. And the person says, your tit shall hang, pardon the language. The literal translation by Shamlal was in Times of India, who wrote under the pen name Adib, was this: don't take pride in your youth, you shall also have a wrinkled face and your tit shall sag. Now, that is not a Buddhist insight into Buddhist philosophy. It is
Into the
talking of
Buddhist
universal
experience. Yeah.
existential dilemmas. All right, we'll leave it at that. What do you know of Geet Govind?
Geet Govind is a text by Jayadev in Bengal. I wouldn't comment too much upon it because I haven't read it myself.
But that again is a text from ancient India,
Yes, sir.
which is not, it's a multi-layered thing.
Yes,
Jayadev's Geet Govind talks of Radha and Krishna.
Yes, sir.
It is into the dance mode, it is into the sculpture mode,
Yes, sir.
especially Odissi and so on. And anyway, we'll let it pass. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to continue with the history. You said ancient history. Where does ancient history actually begin for India?
Ma'am, history we specifically associate, distinguish with proto-history is when
These are
the written texts.
nomenclatures that have been derived in the last 200 years. These are the semantic nomenclatures, proto-history, pre-war, whatever history you're talking about.
Yes, ma'am. So, in terms of how history is categorized, I'm going by those terms. In terms
So
of
those are the colonial categorizations we're talking about. So I'm talking in terms of, as an Indian, if I tell you the Mahabharata book begins saying it's itihasa. What
Yes,
I'm
sir.
talking about is itihasa.
Yes,
How
sir.
would you consider, how would you take that as a history of India?
Ma'am, you mentioned like the epic tradition is history.
So I'm saying the book Mahabharata
Yes, sir.
starts by saying this is itihasa.
Yes, sir.
This is as verily it happened,
Yes, ma'am.
told in the form of storyline. Okay, the methodology is storyline. So, how would you consider Mahabharat to be? Is it not a part of our history in terms of the events, the geographical locations? And so, how old is ancient history of India?
Ma'am, with specific reference to the Mahabharat, there again, there are contestations in terms of how much of it can we regard as history in the true sense of the term, although there have been a lot of archaeological correlations done by, say, historians like Bibi Lal, with specific reference to Hastinapur, then Dwarka, I can't remember.
S.R. Rao.
S.R. Rao. S.R. Rao did work in Dwarka. So, the problem sometimes with bringing together archaeological and textual traditions is very difficult because the nature of both sources are very different. But so the Itihas tradition, certain aspects of it can definitely be considered as history. But
which certain aspects can be considered history in terms of personalities, in terms of locations, in terms of what happened at Kurukshetra?
in terms of locations, I would say.
So
because
if there is a
storylines
location,
have multiple layers to them, and sometimes
like multiple layers in the sense.
Ma'am, stories I believe can add on over time and little aspects of it.
So okay, so your interpretation of this is based on what you have read about, and you have not read the Mahabharata. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am. I
Yeah.
haven't
So
read
as
the
he
Mahabharata.
said that since you have not read Sarkar, you can't say much about it, so you cannot say much. But I'm asking you as an Indian, how deep is the part of your our history?
The question which she asked is a very interesting opening for you.
Yes,
You
sir.
concede that there is a location which is corroborated by archaeological evidence.
sir.
A location must have been with some actors and some event must have taken place. So the other things fit into that there.
Okay.
But before Mahabharata, I mean, there is a period that we nomenclature as Dwapar, Treta, and Satyug, or the Vedic period. Okay, so how would you, as a historian, if you are to have a relook as the history of India, as the ancient India, going beyond the colonial interpretation of history, how would you look at that history, which is archaeologically getting proved? I'm sure you are aware of the recent Sanoli excavations also.
Yes, ma'am.
And you are aware of the Indus Saraswati Valley findings, where you have found traditions of the Tika, you have found traditions of the swastik, you have found traditions of the yogic postures, etc. How would you, and you have found, artwork, rock artwork, which is talking about the scenes from Krishna's life. So how would you, as a historian, like to relook at India's ancient history?
Ma'am, I would say at the same time that I don't think that these are, the contestation is still happening and discussions are still happening. So it's an ongoing process, and I mean, as far as I know, I think a certain degree of respect should be given to sources, and so according to sources as of now, proto-history roughly.
So
begins
Mahabharata, the Granth Mahabharata,
Yes,
as put into words through Smriti and Shruti,
Yes, ma'am.
is not a reliable text to go by.
No, ma'am. I do agree that there are that they are very, very important sources for reconstructing our idea of history. But I'm at the same time I'm also saying that we should approach all sources with caution and try to not rely on any one source, but bring together.
What else could be the source for ancient India besides our text, when there is a complete denudation of the northern Indian landscape, geographical landscape? What other source can you go back to besides our text and besides our inscriptions?
Ma'am, we do. I am saying that our inscriptions, our texts, our archaeological remains, all should be taken together to construct a wholesome idea of our history.
Okay, you still haven't answered my question. What would be your take? How deep is the root of Indian history?
Ma'am, I would say the Harappan age.
Itihasa, Harappan.
Yes, ma'am.
So if the Harappan is
2600
nomenclatured as only 26,
Ma'am, that is what
the
we are
Vedas are
being
8,000
taught.
years old, has been documented by us.
Have you come across a book called Early Indians by Tony Joseph?
I've read of it. I've read a review. I haven't read it.
I would very strongly recommend that don't read of it. Read the book,
Okay.
small book, before you go for the interview.
Okay,
Because this debate, you
Ah.
might have a major difference with her and not concede the chronology, but there is a DNA analysis which has
Yes, sir.
tried
Yes,
to
sir. I did
go
go
through
through
the
that.
next question of the
Yes.
relationship between the Indus Valley civilization
Civilization
and
and
the
the
Aryan
Vedic,
civilization and the origin of the Aryas and dispersal of the DNA all over the
Yes, sir.
subcontinent. I think for a person doing ancient Indian history,
That's very critical
it would
book.
be
Yes,
absolutely
sir. I remember
critical.
reading there was a entire page in the Hindu. I remember, which was
But
If,
read the
if
book,
you had
yeah.
done the entire page in Hindu, you would be in a position to answer my or her queries without going through the book. Don't fall into the trap of either agreeing with her or disagreeing with her totally.
But
I have this running battle. I don't quite concede, but I think there is more than grain of
Yes,
truth
sir.
on the criticism of colonial interpretation of Indian history, Christian missionary interpretation of Indian history, the 19th century thing, and even the Indus Valley excavations are only 100 years old, John Marshall in Mohenjo-daro and so on.
And very little has been done actually, that also by chance. But I'll just ask you one last question. What made you decide to be in the civil services? What do you think you can contribute and what attracts you? I mean, what is you feel that added value that will bring into your career, into your contribution to the nation, and how will this benefit the country?
Ma'am, there are multiple reasons. Firstly, in terms of, I always wanted to do something in which I could contribute to and give to society in some way. And at a personal level,
you can
it
start
would
an
be-
NGO and do it. You can start it and could have done that
Yes,
to
ma'am.
contribute to society.
But the nature of work and the ability to bring about change and that sort of personal
NGOs are
satisfaction
doing
and
it left, right,
gratification.
and center. NGOs are doing it left, right, and center. Why IAS?
Ma'am, it provides you, I think, a better platform and a more diverse platform to do it. So, firstly, in terms of personal satisfaction, and secondly, as a response to your question, the sheer diversity and areas where you can work on at the same time in different areas is something that deeply motivates me. Thirdly, it was my parents. I am very close to my parents, and my parents, from the very beginning, how they were a major motivation for me in this journey as well.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, let me take you to a totally different direction. Did you or anyone in your family get COVID?
Yes, sir. I got the COVID in the second wave, and my mother and my brother got it in the first wave.
What lessons has the COVID pandemic taught us? I'm talking in a very general sense.
Sir, at the nation level or at a personal
At a
level?
very, at a global level, I would say.
So, firstly, most importantly, the importance of public health. Secondly, at a more, in terms of all aspects, be it economics, health, social relations, the interconnectivity of the world is a major lesson that we have drawn in, be it in terms of affecting the global supply chains, the global market. Thirdly, I think the importance of at a personal level across the world, we have understood the importance of relationships, of social relationships, because loneliness was something that people all across the world dealt with in terms of loss of our loved ones. So the idea of emotional bonds and how it's important to strengthen them is something that I feel we've learned.
And hasn't it also taught us something about technology?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, technology in terms of improvement in technology that we as a world constantly be on our feet on, and I think it has led to a lot of innovations in a very short span of time as well, because there was a major pandemic, and as a response to that, a lot of Indian innovations have also come into force, and the COVID, the vaccines were also formed in a very short span of time. So I think that was also a major learning as well.
Many countries resorted to vaccine nationalism in response to COVID. Was that the right approach, or you think a different approach would have worked?
So I think, as I said, it's an interconnected world, and both aspects of the issue must be kept in mind. ensuring adequate vaccines for your own nation is first and foremost very, very important. At the same time, hoarding is something that should be, like, as a nation, as a global world order, we should go against. So certain countries hoarding as many as 20-30 times of their required vaccine doses should definitely have been condemned upon, when certain other areas of the world hadn't even got their first shot. So as the first step, ensuring enough for your nation, and then I think in a global interconnected world, sharing them with others was, according to me, the right
You mentioned
step.
the global world order. What kind of a world order do you think emerging post-COVID?
Post-COVID, I think we have understood the importance of cooperation. So that is definitely emerging. Secondly, in terms of a shift, I would, not necessarily a shift, but the centrality of China in the global world order in certain way, or the importance of China. You can't ignore China as something that has emerged, and it affecting global relations.
No, in the sense that China as the source of the virus, or China as a country which emerged from the virus the fastest? I mean,
in both
in
ways,
what
and
ways are you-
thirdly, also in terms of the effect on global supply chains, and it being the major source of a majority initially of all the requirements that were needed, the masks, the PPE kits, all of that was coming from China as well. So there was a lot of dependence on China, at least in the initial stages of the pandemic.
You have said world cinema is one of your hobbies.
Yes.
In what ways has world cinema changed over the last decade?
So I think there is a lot more viewership, and that I think has changed the content of world cinema as well. And the newer platforms are emerging where the accessibility to world cinema is more and more. So
You mean OTT?
yeah, OTT platforms, and recently there's this new OTT platform called Mubi which has emerged. So it provides a platform where you're not just looking at your own language films, but you have access to, in terms of the world audience, I think has changed, and therefore the content and the creativity that individual filmmakers can employ and therefore reach out to the world, I think has changed.
So what does watching world cinema promote more universal brotherhood?
I think it does for those who watch it.
You also practice yoga.
Yes.
Which day is the International Day of Yoga?
So 21st June.
Why was 21st June chosen?
Sir, I think it is because of the summer solstice that day. I'm not very sure.
Okay, that's all from my side.
Shruti, the board is very satisfied with your performance, your confidence, your grace, your poise, your presence of mind.
Thank you, sir.
Answers given are absolutely to the point, not specific. I would that you please understand that what sir had asked, there was a revolution in medical technology, like telemedicine.
The mRNA vaccine in particular, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Air
So I
ambulances.
think, yeah, I mean,
I
because
should have
that was such a
talked-
topical thing,
Yes,
so I
sir,
thought,
yes, sir.
you could have given a more robust answer
Okay,
to
sir.
that one, I thought. And especially, what are the elements of the new, because apart from promoting, greater international cooperation, there is also the threat of xenophobia, racism,
Yes,
deglobalization, all these are also going to be features of the new post-COVID world order, because it has also reinforced the nationalist tendencies, and countries are all going to look after themselves first. I think the public health infrastructure in their own country is more important than. So as I said, it will have its positive and its negative impacts, and as of now, the negative impacts seem to be more. So I thought on
Yes,
that,
yes, I think
especially
that-
because that's such a topical thing.
Yes, sir.
So I thought you could have done better with that one. But
Okay, sir.
in general, I think we were all
Sir,
satisfied.
very satisfied. The whole gamut of testing kits, productions of ICUs,
Yes.
air ambulances, remdesivir production. India became the pharmacy of the world.
Yes, sir.
Let us not forget that.
Those examples weren't coming to my mind at that point.
You are
But you
so
should have been prepared for this
Yes,
one.
yes.
That's
prepared
what I
for
thought.
that. Somebody as sharp as you're not a mediocre. You are a top level student and a candidate. One would expect only the best, nothing less than 100%. 99% is not good enough for somebody like you. Sir.
I'm extremely happy. I thought you were very, very good. And I think I have no hesitation in saying that I would have recommended you in the top bracket. I would expect to see you in the first 10. If you don't, I will be greatly disappointed and be shaken in my experience as a teacher of grading younger people. I think you are perfect. Absolutely.
What happened
perfect.
in your last attempt?
So last attempt, what happened was due to some unforeseen error, my medium was changed to Hindi. So I had wrote my entire this thing and I missed by 1 mark the interview call. So that happened.
I can imagine something like that must have happened.
Okay, I am very happy that when you came, you were sitting like this, and casually, automatically, you came back to the most desirable posture of sitting like this, which gives you more, freedom. It gives you more relaxation.
I was very uncomfortable.
I know. I was going to tell you, but I noticed that you did it very nicely, and you came back to a very normal position. In terms of your answers, of course, whatever you have read, whatever the computer has, the computer will only give that information. I would like you to caution on one point when you name the Sarkar as nationalist. So bringing out facts which were covered and uncovering facts or writing about things which have not been talked about by the colonial historians, I don't think you should label it as nationalist. So because it might be against the grain of today's if you use the word nationalist for people who are writing facts of his history which have not been told to us, might not give a very pleasant
what else can
this is what I just thought. That was one word you should not use. These are students.
So I should just say like a historian. I shouldn't use any particular terminology.
I personally would not try to call them as nationalists. I would just call them as good historians who are trying to unearth things that have not been told to us. Like Mazumdar. I mean, the difference between Tarachand and Mazumdar's history of the freedom movement. So one was writing from different, from the factual facts, and this is the whole thing. NCERT drama when G. Parthasatri was the head. The whole drama was that. Because the reader was put out of the committee because he says, I will not change facts of history. Where they were being told to change facts of history, I'm talking about the 60s and 70s. So people who are writing facts which may not be comfortable should not be labeled either as, we call them colonialists because we were under a rule. So we call them, but we're not naming them as nationalists or anti-nationalists. That was, otherwise you were very well, you tried to do your best, you tried to come to archaeology, but you missed out on the depth because obviously it's a big topic. It's a very big topic and you have not been taught about it.
Yes. What was the other book that you mentioned earlier on, apart from Early India by Tony Joseph?
Early Indians is something which I want you to definitely talk about. D.D. Kosambi, you can't dismiss because he was in his personal life a Marxist. It is the first case of multidisciplinary sources being brought to ancient Indian history. Even when he talks of myths, he talks of the myth of Bhagirath as the hydraulic engineer who was taming Ganga and making dams, run of the river dams, which nobody else has the guts to suggest. So myth and reality in Indian history he talks about. Mostly people get confined to introduction to Indian history or outline of Indian history and culture by Kosambi. They don't go into myth and reality in his other essays. I think he was a person who had the courage to say that there was myth which provided insight into Indian history and was absolutely secure in Pali and Prakrit and Sanskrit and numismatics and mathematical statistics. He was a professor of theoretical mathematics in Caltech Institute of Fundamental Sciences. So people in fields other than history have done such seminal work. So you can't possibly, as a student in St. Stephen's and the best college and the presumably, although from JNU, I think JNU in the pits now, so one of the best universities in the country, not afford to miss that. And at what the ma'am said, you see, it is a question of the advanced history of India, for instance, which is not fashionable. Datta Rai Chaudhary and Majumdar. They are not nationalist historians. They are Indian historians interpreting Indian history from a lens or a prism which is free from the colonial part. Now, one last question I want to ask you. Yes. When is your interview?
It's on 8th of April.
I don't think you have anything to worry about it. Forget about the 1 mark missing last year. Go there with a degree of confidence that you are going to top. If not top, there's a lottery. First 10 in any case. Relax. You are very good.
Just one input on history again. This multidisciplinary approach is happening now. We're approaching it from all the angles, like the science angle, the DNA angle, the epigraphy, the archaeology, textual data, and astronomical data embedded in both the epics and in the Rig Veda. So dating them and coming to those conclusions, because we all know that the first science was this knowing the Brahman, knowing the nakshatras. So all that disciplines are now coming together, converging, and we have already made 3 attempts, and we are now in the final stage. So all that is, so you should be a little in the know that this is happening in the background.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
All the best.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.